Hey, folks, coming up on Roland Martin Unfiltered for Wednesday, January 9th, 2019. More drama in Birmingham over the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute's decision to rescind an invitation to civil rights and human rights activist Angela Davis. 3 of their top board members have resigned. The city council and the school board have passed resolutions praising Angela Davis, and now there's going to be an alternative event celebrating Angela Davis. Roy Johnson of AL.com will join us with all of the latest details. Also, folks, a new development in the R. Kelly case after the surviving R. Kelly documentary aired over the weekend in Chicago. The Cook County State's attorney, Kim Fox, she is asking folks with information that could lead to him being prosecuted to come forward. Look for my interview with her as we talk about the particular case. Donald Trump threw a temper tantrum that ended a meeting today between Democrats over the issue of reopening the government. Now, last night when he gave his wall speech, he threw out that black people and Latinos are most impacted by illegal immigration. I have 2 experts, one conservative who says that is absolutely the case, another, an economist and labor expert who says, hold up, you're a little bit wrong on that one. We'll break it down for you. Also, folks, Congresswoman Presley, she had some tough words for Donald Trump on the floor of the U.S. House, and it was another CBC member who was presiding who had to gently let her know that that was not the place to criticize the president. We'll show you that video. Also, teachers in Los Angeles preparing for a major strike. We'll talk with Randy Weingarten of the American Federation of Teachers Union about that particular strike. Also, we continue to highlight the importance of HBCU professors with AT&T's Dreaming Black initiative. We'll talk with a professor from Morgan State who says the next Facebook or Twitter founder is going to come out of Morgan State. Folks, it's time to bring the funk on Roland Martin Unfiltered. Let's go.
He's got it. Whatever the miss, he's on it. Whatever it is, he's got the scoop, the fact, the find. And when it breaks, he's right on time and it's rolling. Best believe he's knowing. Putting it down from sports to news to politics. With entertainment just for kicks, he's rolling. It's on go, roll, y'all. It's Roland Martin, yeah. Rolling with Roland now. He's funky, he's fresh, he's real, the best, you know he's Roland Martin now.
All right, folks, we've been covering the drama out of Birmingham with the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute after they decided to rescind an award for Angela Davis. The decision was made on Friday. It has led to huge uproar in Birmingham. Now, the 3 top members on the board of directors, they have resigned as a result of that decision. Chairman Mike Oatridge, who works for Honda, First Vice Chair Walter Bodie, and Secretary Janice Kelsey are no longer members of the board. They have released a statement finally commenting on this issue. Joining us live from Birmingham is AL.com columnist Roy Johnson, who has been covering this. Roy, it is no shock that this is happening. I knew it was going to come down, and it came down today. They have been under intense pressure for the last 4 days since making that decision.
Well, as you said, there's no surprise that these shoes finally dropped, and I expect there will be more. This is a big blow to the Institute. It's a black eye that certainly extends around the world. The coverage has been global. You had to see some heads roll, and these were the first 3. I imagine there's going to be some reconfiguring of the board before this is all over, and certainly more scrutiny on a board that is now still clearly in the crosshairs of a lot of people in this city.
I was talking to some folks there, and they said, first off, that the majority of the board isn't African American. You had those 3 resignations, and then, of course, they released a statement where they acknowledged that the drama this was created in Birmingham.
Yeah, that's true. And I know some of the people on the board, and most of them are good people, and we're still waiting to figure out how they came to this extremely bad decision and what were the factors, what were the pressures that led them to do it, and how they could not see this fallout coming. That still has not been explained to us. We've not gotten behind the curtain enough to find out exactly how this came about. We just know it came about quickly. It came about due to pressure from the Jewish organizations, from many Jewish organizations in the city. Most of people that I've spoken with in the Jewish community were surprised that they canceled the gala. They certainly had the right to express their opinion and their misgivings about the honoree, and that is their right. But the fact that the honor was canceled, that the honor was rescinded, and that the gala was canceled caught many of them by surprise.
And of course, the pressure also added by the fact that the city council and I think it was also the school district who both passed resolutions praising the work of Angela Davis. Roy, did you hear me there?
I did. I just heard. I didn't hear the last part.
I said the
city council,
city council, and the school board. I believe both of them they passed resolutions praising the work of Angela Davis. Correct?
Yes. Those organizations both did that very publicly. Yesterday, the city council, in an impassioned speech by one of the councilors, talked about the importance of Angela Davis and the importance of running your own institutions, and how the fact that if that had been a man, it probably would not have been done the way it came down. And then the school board gave its own resolution today. So organizations around the city are coming out in favor of honoring Angela Davis. And then, of course, as you mentioned at the top of the show, a coalition of local leaders, academics, business leaders, political leaders have come together and decided there will be an event celebrating Angela Davis on February 16th.
Let's talk about that. And it's not going to be a ticketed event. It's going to be open to the public, correct?
It's a grassroots event. They have not decided the venue. It's going to be a conversation with Angela Davis to talk about not just her legacy, but her work around the world now for human rights. And it'll be open, and it'll be an opportunity for everyone to come. I spoke with one of the organizations that sent a letter to the Civil Rights Institute saying that they asking them to reconsider their selection of her. And the head of that board, who said that they unanimously sent the letter, said they would welcome the opportunity to sit down with Professor Davis when she was here and perhaps start a dialogue to see if they could come to some common ground.
It's also, I believe, this also causes folks to confront this whole issue of black-Jewish relations. Of course, we recently saw Mark Lamont Hill, who was fired from CNN because of his public support for Palestinians. Of course, Angela Davis said in her own statement that was the reason why this decision was made, even though the Civil Rights Institute has yet to say exactly what comments from her public record that they say do not meet the criteria of the Fred Shuttlesworth Award. And are any folks talking about that, this whole idea of black folks and Jewish folks in Birmingham being at odds over issues like this?
Well, what's interesting is what people are talking about is that there are numerous coalitions between African Americans and people in the Jewish community working on various projects. This was an instance that I think caught many people by surprise. Certainly anyone has the right to express their opinion and object to anyone being honored, but I haven't run across anyone in the Jewish community here who expected that the BCRI would comply with their request and then cancel their event. So I think you're going to see more opportunities and more, maybe not through the BCRI, but see more events that are trying to bring people together to have an open dialogue about the things that matter to each organization, to each community, and see if there can be more of an effort to move forward in a positive way. The head of the board for the Birmingham Holocaust Education Center, which did send a letter to BCRI, said she hopes that something good does come out of this because every city needs it, and certainly Birmingham is one.
All right, Roy Johnson, AL.com. We appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
All right.
I want to bring my panel right now. We have Rena Shaw-Barrar, Republican strategist, also Joe Madison, a Sirius XM radio show host, Monique Presley, attorney, and of course we also have Bill Spriggs, economist, AFL-CIO, Howard University. Folks, again, this went from rescinding the decision on Friday to them not commenting. They still have not commented beyond these board members resigning. Now 3 folks resigning, lots of public pressure. Pretty stupid move by the Civil Rights Institute.
Very stupid move. And here we are in 2019 with an individual who, by the way, has world recognition. And, you know, it takes you back to you know, the 60s, maybe even the 50s. And of all places, Birmingham, Alabama. And I'm
a woman who's a native of Birmingham.
Yes, exactly. And I'm just so glad that Fred Shuttlesworth isn't alive to see this, because I'm certain he would be outraged to know that his name has been besmirched like this.
Monique, you had Roy made a point about one of the council members talked about that they would have not done this to a male recipient. Now, what's interesting is that last year Harry Belafonte was one of the recipients, has been very critical of Israel. Danny Glover's a previous recipient, also critical of Israel. Those awards were never rescinded. Now is the case with Angela Davis.
Right. We see the misogyny and the sexism kicking up all over the place, and I call it the era of Trump. But we also see the just privilege and the exertion of power and privilege in much more of an entitled fashion due to the current climate. So I think that this isn't just about, obviously, Angela Davis. It's not just about Jewish-Black relations. It's about a white power center that can flex its muscle, and it doesn't have to be on the conservative side. It can be on the liberal side as well, and that's what we saw happen here.
Rena, Bill?
Yeah, I would say, what's most disappointing is that she's not being judged on, it's been said, the totality of her work. That's really disappointing. And as a millennial, I got to put that hat on for a minute, because I think young people in this country, we grew up thinking our country's so diverse and that diversity of thought is encouraged. And last I checked, this is the United States of America. It's not Israel. This whole defending Israel at all costs is so, it just is, it confuses me on so many levels, because I think I see it happening the most out of the right. I know it's happening on the left as well, especially last week with the talk of Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib and her comments, highlighting again, she's a Palestinian woman. The conflict between Israelis and Palestinians, again, I remain so confused by why we can't inject our American ideals into this conversation and say, hey, this is wrong. Somebody should, again, we should talk about the fact that founding farmers, it was in that article, the AL.com article, that founding farmers have owned slaves. Why aren't we rescinding awards of all these people who have done all these controversial things? Why just Angela Davis? So it's very confusing for me. Again, I can't stop using that word.
Bill?
Well, I think, we have to get back to what is it that she objected to.
Which they still have not said, and would not even tell her.
Correct. And it creates division at a time in the progressive community. We don't need division. And if they were surprised or shocked that they got this reaction from the commission, then shame on them. Don't raise the issue if it's not going to be that serious to you.
Also, I appreciate that grassroots folks, Joe, have responded and are going to still say they're going to hold an event on February 16th to honor her.
And that's exactly what should happen. Most of these significant changes, all significant changes, quite candidly, always start from the bottom up. Yeah. And that's what this is an example of. And as the panel was talking, I just wonder how many of these people in Birmingham who object to whatever they object to and not telling anybody have been to Israel themselves, where even Israelis disagree over issues as it relates to the Palestinian and the Israeli conflict there. I've been to Israel, and I've met with people who have been both Israeli Jews, who have been Palestinians. Many of them have tried to work together. They often object. There's debate within.
This is one of those debates we can actually say there are good people on both sides.
Yeah,
I hate that phrase now, but it's kind of true,
But I bet you after they see this podcast, I'll bet you anything, Roland. Now they're going to come up with some kind of explanation. But the reality is, you're right. It's going to happen anyway. She's going to be honored. She's worth listening to. I mean, this goes back to, remember when, I'm old enough to remember when the people rejected Angela Davis because they thought she was a communist.
Right.
This is absurd in this day and age.
I'll tell you one thing is not absurd. A lot of reaction to the Surviving R. Kelly documentary on Lifetime television last week. Now we know that the Fulton County District Attorney in Georgia is opening an investigation into R. Kelly, and also the Cook County State's Attorney Kim Foxx. She has made a public call for folks to call her office for information that could lead to him being arrested and indicted. I earlier talked to Kim Foxx about that. Here's my conversation with the Cook County State's Attorney. First and foremost, you made this call yesterday for information with regards to R. Kelly. I would assume that was all based upon the response to the Lifetime documentary.
That's right. We had received a number of phone calls in the days since the documentary aired where people had raised concerns about what information they had and what was potentially could happen as a result. And so what we realized was one, there was not an open investigation, that people had a lot of information, but we would not be in a position to even have an investigation if folks weren't willing to share whatever information that they had. And so that is why we made the call, because there was this expectation that something would happen. But in order for anything to happen, we need the participation of the public.
Explain to folks statute of limitations, because that really speaks to what's going on here. We know in murder cases there's no statute of limitations, but when it comes to being involved with an underage girl, what are the statutes? And also, of course, we saw with the documentary that there were several individuals who are of age, and they had wellness checks, but they said, I'm fine. Is there anything that you can do? So explain to people, legally what you really can do.
Yeah, so the statute of limitations for felonies in Illinois is 3 years. There are specific statute of limitations depending on sex assault, sex abuse, domestic violence. And the laws have changed during the course of the last 20 or so years, where the sex abuse or sex assault cases now have a longer window, depending on what the law was at the time of the incident. So without going into the weeds, we're looking at anywhere between 3 and upwards of 25 years. And again, having not fully vetted some of the information that we've gotten, we're not just talking about incidents of sex with underage minors. We're talking about instances of domestic violence, sexual abuse, sex without consent, based on some of the preliminary information that we have. So there's no one statute that we're looking at. And again, depending on the time period, we can be talking about anything from a few months ago all the way back to 25 years.
Gotcha. So again, if it doesn't matter if somebody, let's say, is 35 years old today, if they were involved with R. Kelly or anybody else 20 years ago, you still have a period of time there.
Right, potentially. So that's why it's important that if anyone has information, that they bring it to us so that we can break down the time period in which the act had happened, and what the existing laws were at the time, to see if we have any extensions in the statute. And again, I think it's really important because people are talking just about one component of this, which is age, but there is also questions that have been raised around consent and around domestic violence and the others. And so I think it's important that if someone has information that they feel is relevant, that they make the phone call so that we can vet that information out.
You also, in this case, you have to deal with the reality that, who can come forth? Is it a question of the alleged victim, or is it family members or parents? Because we saw in the case where he was tried, where you had some family members who said that the young girl in the video wasn't, they were able to confirm her identity, but other family members said that was not her. The young woman, she never testified, so she wasn't the one who came forward. It was with this videotape. And so explain that to folks as well. Who can actually get, frankly, a case moving forward? Is it the person who was victimized, or could it be a family member?
Yeah, I mean, I think information that leads to additional information can come from anywhere. So it can be a family member, it could be a friend, it could be someone who witnessed something while they were out. To your point, if we are going to have enough information based on the facts, the law, and the evidence to see if there's a case that can be proven, certainly we would have to have an actual victim, someone to say that this, in fact, did happen to me, and can give context to when, where, how it happened. So launching, someone else can bring the information forward, but we will need to have an actual victim. The Constitution affords anyone the opportunity to confront their accusers. Mm-hmm. And I want to be very clear, our call for people to bring us information is not based on the assumption that Mr. Kelly will be found guilty. But we can't even get to the question if people are reluctant to engage us with whatever information that they have.
Last question. We know that based upon the documentary, there were people who were flown to other cities and states. If someone is currently residing in Chicago, but let's say something allegedly happened in another state, how do they, does that impact your jurisdiction? But also, let's say there's somebody who is living in another state and they were actually flown to Chicago. So explain that as well.
Certainly. So under Illinois law, we would be responsible just for those acts that happened here in Cook County, so Chicago and our surrounding suburbs. If someone is from another state, but they were here and an act happened here and they left and went back, it's where the act occurred, not where you were a resident. And so if something happened while you were in Illinois and you now live, in New York, you are more than welcome to give us a call and we can get that information. If you believe that something has happened in another state that had nothing to do with Illinois and you reach out to us, we can provide that information to the jurisdiction where that incident occurred.
All right, Cook County State's Attorney Kim Foxx, I appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Roland. Have a good one.
Folks, the phone number that Kim Foxx wants you to call is 773-674-6492, 773-674-6492. And also, phone calls to sex abuse hotlines were up some 20% as a result of the Lifetime documentary. All right, folks, let's talk about Donald Trump, him lying about his wall. Of course, today he met with members of Congress and walked out because he was ticked off when Nancy Pelosi said, we ain't paying for your damn wall. It's been a pretty busy 24 hours, of course, for Donald Trump. And yes, last night, of course, he spoke to the nation. Pretty much a waste of airtime. Yeah, but earlier in the day, Congresswoman Presley, a new member of Congress, she was on the House floor, and let's just say she had a couple of words, pointed words to say to the Orange One.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in opposition to the occupant of the White House. Mr. Trump, you took an oath, just as I did 5 days ago, to protect and defend the Constitution and the American people. Sir,
all right, folks, not quite sure what happened there. We're going to try to re-cue that. Again, Ayanna Presley, she's a new member of Congress who is from Massachusetts. And so, all right, so they tell me they got it fixed. All right, so go ahead and press play.
Mr.
Okay, all right, so they don't have it. All right, then, so that's... So something wrong with the system. Well, y'all calm down in the control room. And so we don't have it there. I'm going to pull it up on my iPad just a second and actually play it. Monique, why don't you talk about your cousin?
You know, I couldn't be prouder of a black woman who gets 1 minute to speak and uses it for everything that it's worth, not just because she has the last name Presley and she's in my family. Am I proud? I am proud because she could have talked about anything and she spoke truth to power the way she's supposed to when there's more than one branch of government. I think it was time well spent and it was worth the little tisk-tisk that she got from House leadership for doing it.
Joe Madison, these freshmen, they really don't give a damn about the normal way of Congress. They made it perfectly clear they're going to operate on their own.
Yeah, not giving a damn is an understatement. And basically that's how they got elected. You know, from the West Coast to the Midwest to the East Coast. It's really a new day. And the bottom line is a whole new attitude out there. Look, what do they have to lose? Let's be quite candid. They're 35th in a committee, so nobody's going to be paying much attention to them or giving them much power anyway. And as far as it appears, they're not trying to appease the leadership. They're dealing with their constituents. And that's what will get them reelected, to be quite candid. It's not going to be Nancy Pelosi, who maybe has got 2 more years in a leadership position. They're playing to their audience that brought them to Congress to do just what they're doing.
And Rena, folks want them to see that. I want you to comment when we get 1 second. I'm going to go and play this from my iPad. So here we go. Here we go to my iPad, please.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in opposition to the occupant of the White House. Mr. Trump, you took an oath, just as I did 5 days ago, to protect and defend the Constitution and the American people. Sir, you dishonor that oath. You devalue the life of the immigrant, the worker, and the survivor. I see right through you, and so do the American people. This has nothing to do with border security. Your shutdown, another Trump-generated crisis, has brought a tsunami of hurt to the American people. So today I rise to lift the voices of the unheard. I rise today on behalf of the families concerned about feeding their children because their WIC benefits will run dry. I rise today in solidarity with the thousands of workers with calloused hands and broken spirits working for no pay. I rise today in support of the survivor fleeing violent hands, seeking safety only to find the shelter door locked because of your shutdown. I rise today in support of the American people who believe in the promise of this nation and ask for honest pay for an honest day's work. Today I rise as one and I stand as thousands. Thank you, and I yield back.
Members are reminded to refrain from engaging in personalities toward the president.
Now, of course, chairing was former CBC chair, Congressman G.K. Butterfield. Rita, what the hell? First of all, personality towards the president. I don't know what that phrase even means.
You know, in this moment, checks and balances are so very needed and necessary. So I could see people saying, has she no concern or care or knowledge of really her place? She should stay in her lane. She should know, really, you don't engage in this kind of talk from the floor. But this is not a moment for that anymore. Frankly, it's really not, because it's time that we really let the American people know here in Washington that this is how our government works. And I really like that she spoke truth to power. She used her role as an elected representative to say something that concerns her about another branch of government that she's able to check on. So yes, she's one voice in a very large House of Reps, but it's good that she did it. Of course, conservatives are going to be angry. I, on the other hand, am, I'm envious. I'm super envious. I caught a lot of flack last week on PBS. I said I admire people like Ayanna, people like Ilhan Omar. I even said Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. These women, gosh, I wish at least one of them were Republican. Just all of them are Democrats. And I haven't got one to say, here's a conservative woman. So, I'm in this moment very concerned about women from across the U.S., women across the ideological spectrum being represented in our government. But we should call a spade and say she's super impressive. I have heard in the past from conservatives that she is probably the most impressive of the youngest new crop of progressive young female Democrats that were elected. Only one point I would argue with you is that they still need Speaker Pelosi. She holds that power to fundraise.
First of all, she ain't going anywhere.
First
of all, she's not going anywhere.
Look, the reality is this, and all that talk, that's great. Do you honestly think the people in Peoria, I always talk because that's middle America, understood what Butterfield said? They don't care. I mean, he said...
I'll choose East St. Louis before I choose.
All right, let's pick East St. Louis. I went to school in St. Louis. A lot of good friends in East St. Louis.
There you go.
They don't care. They don't have no idea what the procedure was, nor do they care. And they probably didn't even know who he was. They sat there and heard, and this is what
First of all, you know GK was agreeing with her, but because he was presiding chair, he had to make the statement. But the bottom line, he was like, "Yeah, go ahead, girl, go ahead, keep saying that thing."
And don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong.
That was universal. I agree with that.
And you're right. I mean, Pelosi does hold the power. Yes, she will give them. She'll give them all an office in the corner, in the basement somewhere.
Because they're freshmen.
And they were going to get it in.
They're freshmen.
They were going to get it in. Anyway.
Now, folks,
they have good offices, and legislation comes from the people.
But the better office is when you've been that way. That's the whole point.
Right.
That's the whole point. Let's just be real clear. That's just like who get a big piece of chicken.
Well, Ayanna has Shirley Chisholm's office. That's the best office you can get.
I got you. All right, folks. Last night, y'all, when Donald Trump gave his wall speech, you knew it didn't take him long to try to pimp black people. Press play.
But all Americans are hurt by uncontrolled illegal migration. It strains public resources and drives down jobs and wages. Among those hardest hit are African Americans and Hispanic Americans.
The question is that true? Joining us right now is Dr. Carol Swain, author of Debating Immigration. She says that is the case. Dr. Bill Spriggs, an economist, professor at Howard University, also chief economist, AFL-CIO. Different perspective. So, Carol, I'll start with you. You say Donald Trump is correct that illegal immigration hurts black people?
I've been saying that for years. I wrote my first book, published a book with Cambridge Press in 2007. And one of the reasons that I published that first book was because the black leaders were not speaking to the facts. When you have a oversupply of labor, surplus labor, it hurts blacks, white, poor whites, as well as Hispanics. Anyone that has a low wage, low educated worker, they are hurt by the competition.
Okay. Bill Spriggs, you studied these numbers quite well, led the economics department at Howard University. What do you say to what Carol just said?
Well, let's separate a couple of things here. First off, the wall has nothing to do with illegal immigration. So spending $5 billion, if you want to help disparately impacted workers, that's not where I'd spend it. Spend it on education, job training. But let's separate that. Second thing is the issue immigration or is the issue illegal? And so if someone is here undocumented and cannot assert their full labor rights, then yes, that hurts everyone in the United States, all hues, because those workers can't assert their rights as workers. But do their numbers and do immigrants hurt? That's not true. Here's the case. Immigrants create demand. So if you look at cities that have been severely hurt, like Flint, Michigan, this is not from immigration. This is from General Motors deciding we won't make auto parts in the United States. If you look at New Orleans before Katrina, black people had no competition from immigrants, but had horrible jobs, horrible wages, and died in the flood because they didn't have transportation to leave the flood. So where you don't have immigrants does not mean that black people prosper. When you have immigrants, you create demand. What do we do as a people? Disproportionately, black people are employed in transportation. If you show me a community that's shrinking and dying, they don't have public transportation, they're not hiring bus drivers, they're not hiring subway engineers. So we gain jobs from having increased demand. New York City is vibrant because of immigration. If you look at Los Angeles, it's vibrant because of immigration. So there is a plus to immigration. Is it true that those with the least amount of education might be competition? Well, yes, but African Americans overwhelmingly are high school graduates or more. In fact, if African Americans are overwhelmingly higher educated workers, 45% of unemployed blacks are high school education. Another 48% have more than a high school education. Only a small percentage of unemployed black people are dropouts. The reason African Americans face a problem in unemployment is because if you are a white high school dropout, you have the unemployment rate of a black person with an associate's degree.
Yes, sir.
Carol?
That's why we have a problem with unemployment.
Carol, go ahead.
I'd like to speak to, I'd like to speak to the larger issues that he's referring to. Immigration has been out of control for decades, and the wall is not meant to solve all the problems. That's just one component. We need to totally reform our immigration laws. We need to do something about the people who overstay their visas.
And
40% of the undocumented persons in the country are people who overstayed their visas.
But Carol, I want you to respond to what Bill said. He laid out, you talked about New Orleans, talked about New York and LA.
Yeah, I heard all that.
Okay, so I want you to respond to that where he says that, okay, so respond to what he says in terms of it not hurting black people. Go ahead.
Yeah, there are communities that parts of Detroit and different places where immigrants have moved in and they've set up businesses. That's not relevant to the discussion about what the impact immigration as a whole has on the Black community and low-wage, low-skilled workers. And in those communities where you have lots of immigration, even if the immigrants are working 3 and 4 jobs, as many of them are, they're not making enough money to not be poor. And so that's a greater burden on the education system. And there have been studies to show that Blacks are getting worse education now because all the focus is on trying to educate people from many different languages.
Wait. I'm sorry. Wait.
I'm speaking to it. I'm speaking to what he has to say.
Now, hold on, Carol. You just said there are many different studies that show that the money is going to educate folks.
No, I'm telling you that I want to deal with what he discussed.
Right.
You all can have all the fun
I do too.
Now,
Carol, first of all, that's why. Carol, hold on. Carol, that's why you're here and Bill is here. I'm the one who booked the segment, so I know why you're here. Now go ahead and finish your point, then I'm going to Bill.
Then.
Well, you talk literally for 2 straight minutes, but go ahead.
See, what we really need to be concerned about is the overall impact on the communities. When you have large numbers of undocumented persons or people that don't speak the languages, it impacts the schools.
No. But Carol, how does that impact Black people?
Communities.
No, the discussion.
It pushes them. It affects their ability. Like now, all of those people that we are allowed to stay, they're going to be competing for housing with Black people and other poor people, and so it affects the housing. It affects every segment of society, and the people hurt the most are not just Black people, but low-wage, low-skilled Americans.
Bill,
and it's time for us to put Americans first.
Bill, please respond.
So, the increasing demand for housing can be a good thing because it increases demand for the services that go with it, which means you create jobs. If you look at Appalachia and you look at dying parts of rural America, their complaint is no one wants to live here. We don't have the space or the economy to grow, and our kids are leaving. In many of those places, the only people who have come in to keep those rural, isolated places alive have in many cases been immigrants. So it's not this competition that you suggest. What we do get are from people who want to continually pit worker against worker, not increasing the size of the economy in response to a growing labor force. And so the problem isn't having workers, the problem isn't raising wages, the problem is not maintaining labor standards, and that's the problem that we have right now. We have to do a better job of improving labor standards, and yes, if we granted those workers status so that they could fight with their employers, so that they didn't fear being deported, if we could regularize them, then yes, those workers would be a plus to the economy. It hurts to lower labor standards for any set of workers, whether it's African Americans returning from being incarcerated who must work at any wage or face going back. It's bad for any set of workers to be put in that position of a disadvantage versus their employer. And we have to level the playing field. We have to give workers the right to bargain and to negotiate. And of course, if workers aren't here with status, that does hurt them. But the key is, if you want to be in a community that's vibrant, that's growing, where the economy is expanding and creating opportunities, you have to have more people. The birth rate to native-born Americans, white and Black, has been declining. And so if America's going to grow, it's going to have to grow from having more people from many different sources.
All right,
we
Carol,
just have to be open to that.
Give you the final word, go.
I think that we need to look at the immigration problem as a whole, and that we need to reform immigration. And I think the wall is one part of it. And I think we need to be fair about the things that President Trump has done that's benefit Americans as a whole. And so my position is that we need the barriers. We cannot absorb all the people who want to live here in America. If we have open borders, then most of the world would want to come to America. Many people, there have been surveys about this.
Okay.
And so I think the situation is much more complicated than it's being portrayed.
Oh, well, first of all, we went into detail. I thought Bill was pretty damn specific. Laying
certain
those
aspects
things.
of it, but not. It's much more complicated than
Yeah,
we lay it out there. That's one part of it.
but Carol, I was waiting for you to offer these other stuff that you were talking about.
And I'm trying to do the best I can in a situation that's clearly hostile towards anyone that's conservative.
Carol, hold up. Let me help you out. Now, I used to see you on Lou Dobbs' show.
Yes.
It's two people who have been talking, you and Bill. Okay, this is not hostile.
No,
Carol. This is not hostile. It's not like the whole panel here. So please don't try to jump to that old conservative tactic of, oh my God, it's a hostile environment.
Well, I mean, I listened to the show before I came on, and so I heard nothing positive about the president or about conservatives.
Carol, first of all, Carol, this discussion had nothing to do with Donald Trump. This discussion was about what he had to say about black people and Latinos being hurt by immigration.
He's absolutely right. They are hurt by immigration.
And that's why I offer you the opportunity to say it. Now, if you want,
my book.
But Carol,
Read my book,
hold on,
Carol.
Carol, here's very simple. Bill offered a litany of details, and you had the opportunity to do so. Now, if you couldn't get it done in time, that ain't on me.
I have a whole book on it. So if you want to be educated about it, you can read the chapter that has to do with the Black Caucus, black unemployment, and the impact on American workers.
Okay, Carol, all right, but here's the deal. So we had no issue discussing this, but this was not hostile. So try that on somebody else's show. You had an opportunity and was given it to be able to make your points, but it wasn't hostile. Nice try.
Roland,
it didn't work.
It's great seeing you.
All right, Carol.
And take care.
All right, you take care. You have a good one. All right, then. Rena, go. I know you want to go ahead. I know you want to. Go real quick, 'cause I'm going to go to Randy Weingart next, but go ahead.
Let me go real quick because I'm a conservative. I don't support the wall. I don't think we have extremely porous borders. You know, I just think the arguments you made are those that Republicans should embrace. Talking about competition, the markets. I mean, this is something that Republicans should really applaud, is that there's credo to the argument that honestly, there are some groups that are faring badly because our cities are dead. I am the daughter of legal immigrants, a surgeon that immigrated to southern West Virginia in '71 because of the coal mines, and a woman who was a lawyer and did not practice there. It was the gold mine, my mother said. The coal mine was the gold mine. Why? Because there were jobs. And now that county that I was born and raised in is the epicenter of the opioid epidemic.
Right.
Why? Why? There's no jobs. People don't want to leave there.
There you go.
I was one of those kids who left. Now my brother's gone back. We inject into the economy. We are new Americans, but that's what happens. That argument you made, it's just practical. And I'm not hearing Carol. I'm just not. I'm sorry,
you can't
Carol.
just say read my book. So real quick, Monique, then Joe. Then I got to go to my next topic.
All right. I just want everybody to not miss what Trump does and how it just worked in this episode. He tells the white man to be afraid of everybody of color because we're the ones taking the jobs. Then he gets on there and tells the blacks and the browns to be afraid of the illegals because the illegals are going to take the jobs. It is peddling hate and it is peddling fear and it's lies. The statistics prove what we all know. Black people are coming out with so much education that they do not want the domestic worker jobs that the illegal immigrants and the legal immigrants are coming and taking in the workforce. They are not taking jobs.
Ain't no white folks gonna be out there picking oranges and lettuce. Joe, go ahead real quick.
Education is the currency of the 21st century. And what you see coming to the United States are usually people who lack education. And that's not just happening in the United States, that's happening all over. But isn't it amazing that he opens up his speech yesterday saying unemployment is hurting blacks, but in the same breath, when he gets in front of other people, he says this is the highest employment statistics that we've had in the history of the United States. And then finally, let me say this. If you really want to deal with this issue of employment and who gets hurt, here's what you ought to do. You ought to frog march the owners of these businesses who sit up here, know these folks are illegal, underpay them, and the reason they hire them because they're illegal, because they can't complain.
I'm sorry, you mean like the person where they forged documents at his golf course in New Jersey, or the guy,
The occupant.
The guy in the White House who did the very same thing, and then down there in Florida at Mar-a-Lago, they keep saying, "Hey, we can't hire any Americans. Can we keep hiring folks from outside the country?"
Absolutely. And my mother-in-law, God bless her, and her whole family came from Oklahoma after the Dust Bowl, went to California, worked in the vineyards, and then what happened was they complained about the working conditions. And as soon as they complained about the working conditions, they got fired.
Boom.
And then who took their place? And these, by the way, were educated African Americans who had degrees from places like Langston.
But they were frozen out of other places. That's the only place where they could work.
That's absolutely right.
Exactly.
All right, first of all, Bill Spriggs, thanks for breaking that down for us. We appreciate that. Now let's talk about the issue of labor unrest in Los Angeles. 735,000 students in the L.A. school system, 30,000 teachers, the budget nearly $8 billion. But the teachers are set to go on strike on Monday. Why? Why are they striking? Joining us right now is the head of the American Federation of Teachers Union, Randy Weingarten. Randy, how you doing?
I'm good, Roland. How are you?
Doing great. Now, we have seen
It was great to hear the last panel. Thank you.
Well, yeah, it was so volatile, just all that little nonsense Carol was talking about. But so let's break this thing down. In the last couple of years, we have seen teachers use the power of strikes to get, frankly, what they need and their demands. And so we saw, of course, in Oklahoma, we saw in West Virginia. We saw in Oklahoma, we saw in West Virginia them go on strike. Why are they seeking to go on strike in Los Angeles? What are the reasons?
So let me just say initially that nobody wants to go on strike.
Right.
And a lot of people in the last few days have been saying, is this a strike wave? No, it's not a strike wave. The last thing teachers want to do is go on strike. There's been 20 months of negotiations. What the LA teachers and paraprofessionals are saying is that give us the conditions we need to succeed with kids. Our class sizes are 40 to 50. We don't have nurses in schools. We don't have guidance counselors. There's more armed guards than there are guidance counselors in schools. And at the end of the day, you're right, there's an $8 billion budget. There's a $2 billion reserve. And the state has a lot of money that Gavin Newsom wants to give out to districts as well and deal with education issues. But Austin Butner refuses to negotiate.
Okay, first of all, for folks who don't know, who's Austin Butner?
Sorry, he is the superintendent of schools. And in fact, the first time he ever came to a bargaining session was Monday after a strike date was set. And so what the union has done is they've tried to actually do everything. They've gone through fact-finding. They've waited a long time. And it was only when a strike date was set that the school system actually got serious and actually made a proposal on Monday. Now, they were bargaining all day today. Hopefully they'll bargain all day the next few days. But it actually takes two parties to try to solve things. And the school district really is focusing on dismantling, destabilizing, and crying poverty rather than giving teachers and kids the conditions they need for kids to succeed.
So what specifically are the top 3 or 4 demands of teachers in the LA school system?
Guidance counselors in schools, nurses in schools.
So let's stop right there. When you say guidance counselors in schools, what is the current state? Are there guidance counselors?
80% of the schools. 80%. This is a school district where 80% of the kids are poor. 80% of the schools do not have a full-time guidance counselor or a full-time nurse.
Not one?
They do not, 80% do not have a full-time nurse or guidance counselor. Let me fast forward to the charter school that I help run in New York City that has 100% graduation rate, public high school in the South Bronx with a 95 to 100% graduation rate for the last 5 years. We made a choice to actually have one guidance counselor per 100 children, not one guidance counselor for 1,000 children, but one for 100 children.
And how many students in that school?
In that school,
in
we
New
have
York?
400 high schoolers.
So you have
500 high schoolers.
So you have
one. Yeah. And what I'm saying is, if you understand that emotional well-being and meeting children where they are is incredibly important, you have to deal with the challenges that kids bring.
Got it.
So that is the number one demand. The number two demand is lowering class size enough. I'm a high school teacher. My top class sizes were about 30. If you are a high school teacher with 100 kids, that is a lot, and you want to give them individual attention, that's a lot of kids. The class sizes in LA are 40 to 50. So how are you as a high school teacher going to be able to individually meet the needs of kids?
Got it.
These are the top two demands. So what's happened is that the school district doesn't want to deal with these now because the public now understands that these are the demands. There's a lot of public support for the teachers and for the paraprofessionals. But number one, teachers want to be in their classrooms, but they want the conditions that kids need to succeed.
All right, Randy Weingarten, the head of the AFT, we surely appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, real quick to our panel. Just as I said, we've seen teachers use their power to increase their wages in West Virginia, in Oklahoma, and in fact, several of them ran in Oklahoma and beat a lot of those Republicans, Rena, in Oklahoma, who keep saying, "Oh, I support education," for voting against teachers.
Yeah, that's the thing is, sometimes the talk doesn't match the walk, and that's a problem. Unions have typically been pretty unpopular with conservatives, but I think those notions are changing now. With the younger set of conservatives, those especially who are working in education, they understand that collective bargaining is the only way you can change some of what's happening. And striking is probably one of the best political activism tools in the kit. And I just really, I was sad to see what happened in my native West Virginia, but I just didn't see any other way that those teachers could have seen a raise. It just felt like there was just too much pent-up frustration within the governor's office, within the offices of those state legislators. They were just not going to act unless those teachers came and said, we are striking.
Joe.
So it's going to be interesting to see what happens in other states. But in my home state, though I'm a conservative, I support what happened.
Well, it not only happened in your home state, it also happened in Arizona. It's going to happen in California. And the reason you also have to keep in mind, they have support from the parents, the community. And when you multiply that, when you not only have dues-paying union members, but then when the parents understand and agree what they're fighting for, there was nothing unreasonable about what they said. And what's so crazy is that you'll find that most conservatives probably were educated in public schools.
That's right.
They were educated in public schools. You mentioned Lou Dobbs earlier, because I used to go on his show too. And he swears by the fact that public education was the greatest thing that ever happened to this country, and he's absolutely right.
Well,
this is what separated America from the rest of the world.
Great point.
Clearly, he lost his damn mind since he left. But Monique, real quick.
I hope people will reach out and support this, because these teachers weren't asking for money.
That's right.
They were asking for tools that had nothing to do with their individual salaries or insurance or anything like that, so that the students can succeed. I know in my high school, there were hundreds of us, but there were at least 7 counselors. You got your assigned counselor. Right. And if you're talking about kids who are already in lower socioeconomic conditions, if they can't get to see a counselor, if there's 50 of them in a classroom, if they don't have parents who are able to support them, where are they?
And the purpose of the counselor is to help them make college decisions, job readiness decisions, and you got to have that. Makes no sense whatsoever. Folks, we talked about education. That is, of course, the most important thing when it comes to HBCUs, not the bands, not pledging, not anything else. And so we've teamed up with AT&T for a series of stories about HBCU professors called Dream in Black. Today, we visit Morgan State University in Baltimore, where the whole issue is about technology. Dr. Cornegay.
Yes, sir.
How's it going?
Great.
What do you do?
I'm a hardware hacker, so we really a tinkerer. I tinker with things, most likely, more often electronic devices, and to figure out how they work and what their weaknesses are.
How did you dream big? How did you think about the possibilities of what you can do with that and turn into a career? What were you thinking about that at an early age?
I used to have crazy dreams back then, and I never understood what they were until much later, until I got to college, maybe. But I always would dream about numbers and binary numbers, number sequences. So I would always dream. So and that's probably what prompted me to start out as a math major. So I started out as a math major in college. And then my sophomore year, my math professor pulled me aside and said, well, what are you going to do for the summer? And I said, well, I don't know. So she said, well, here's two opportunities. And so she said, oh, you can go to Prudential. The other option was to go to Bell Laboratories and to do some engineering stuff. I said, cool, I've never done that. What is engineering?
So it was officially called engineering, but for you growing up, it was called tinkering.
Yes, yes, yes.
And so you go to Bell Laboratory?
Yes, I did. I went to AT&T Bell Laboratories.
What was it about it that sort of just blew you away? That caused you to say, oh man, there are no limits here. That I could this thing could go anywhere.
It was a number of things. It was the place, the energy of the place, the innovation. This is a place where creativity, ideas come to life. And they created this environment, and they had tremendous resources, and you had all these brilliant people, especially people that looked like me, who were engineers. Upon graduation, I moved back east, went to work for IBM, T.J. Watson Research Center. I was one of the 3,000. I was only 4 African-American research staff members.
Talk about why it's important for us to encourage not just young folks, but just encourage people to dream big.
If you don't dream, you will never fulfill your destiny. But you have to see yourself, and you have to project it, and you have to speak it into existence. But first, it starts with the visualization.
Mm-hmm. Is it important for you in what you're doing to get students to understand that they have to think bigger, broader, not in once exposed that they may have thought their future as an HBCU student was this, and really what you're seeing is no, it's.
Oh yes, well.
It's you can actually box it.
The next Mark Zuckerberg is going to come from Morgan State University, from this lab. This is someone who's going to think big and have some sort of lead, come up with this innovation that will lead to the next social media craze. So I think I'm always encouraging them to think big and to go beyond. And I give them a lot of latitude, but I expose them to the different aspects of our business, the academic. They do internships so that they, they're pulling their own red wagon, but ultimately I do have some that have that entrepreneurial spirit. So I encourage them, I put them in opportunities where they can flourish and grow and introduce them to the right kind of people, because we need that.
All right, folks, for more information, go to AT&T.com/dreaminblack.
We have to create an art for liberation and for life. Artist Elizabeth Catlett.
All right, folks, HBCU Giving Day. Universities, Allen University, founded in Cokesbury, South Carolina in 1870 as Payne Institute by a number of ministers of the African Methodist Episcopal Church. In 1880, it was moved to Columbia and renamed Allen University in honor of Bishop Richard Allen, founder of the African Methodist Episcopal Church. If you want to give to Allen University, just simply go to allenuniversity.edu. That's allenuniversity.edu. All right, so we certainly support that. Last bit for our panel here, I'll do something different. Each one, you got a minute to talk about whatever you want to talk about. What you got? Rena, you first.
This whole segment got me thinking about really just women in tech and women of color in tech. There's a great woman, Reshma Sajnani, who ran in New York many years ago for Congress, but started Girls Who Code. It's a great organization doing great work to get more young women into tech. I was appalled at some figures I saw last year that said that 50% of employees at Google and Apple are still white, and 83% of tech executives are white. So we really need people of color in these tech fields. It's going to happen through efforts like Reshma's, which is Girls Who Code. So I hope more young women will get involved in STEM careers, particularly at HBCUs.
Joe?
I think that on Martin Luther King Day, instead of so many breakfasts and awards handed out to people, that it really should be a mass demonstration in this country, given the fact that 800,000 workers, people who are not working, or let me put it this way, working and not getting paid. The last time I checked, that was slavery. And that we should not allow this president to blackmail the United States of America, because that's exactly what he's doing. This is blackmail. But I would call on America, like Martin did, that on his birthday, we should have a massive demonstration. And I think organizations, HBCUs, fraternities, you name it, religious organizations, you know, young people have something they call flash mobs. I've seen 2,000 young people show up to have a snowball fight. I think we can show up to protest against what's happening with these unemployed, dedicated public servants and their families.
And of course, that weekend, MLK weekend, will be the Women's March taking place, mass demonstrations all across the country. But you're absolutely right, because he died fighting for sanitation workers. Monique?
I just want to offer a word of encouragement for people who may feel like they don't have a voice. We're 9 days in now to 2019, and some ended 2018 feeling like they were stifled and choked, and what's going on in today's politics is affecting them, but there's nothing they can do about it. That is 100% not true. There is no preacher that has to be without a pulpit these days. There's no politician that has to be without a platform. In the age of social media, there is always a way for you to have your voice heard. Get up, stand up, speak out, and do something about an issue that you care about. It only takes one person to make a majority if you push to join somebody else. So I would like to see everybody step forward and take action in 2019.
All right, folks, here's my final comment. Earlier, we started this show off talking about the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute and them rescinding the award from Angela Davis. Today, 3 of their board members resigned. I dare say any board member of the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute who actually voted to rescind that award, they should resign, because they embarrass the legacy of Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth, somebody who Angela Davis knew and went to high school with his daughter. The reason I say that is because for you to sit here and bow down to pressure when you're recognizing a daughter of Birmingham, somebody who has been on the front lines of human rights, just because you disagree with them calling for a boycott of Israel, that simply isn't enough. And then to put out a deceitful statement stating that on further review of her record that she did not meet the criteria of the award. First and foremost, I went to your website. You don't have the criteria of the award on your website. You haven't even released that criteria. Second of all, you have yet to even say why the award was being rescinded. What that says to me is that you were bowing down to pressure. What that says is that there clearly had to be some Jewish donors to the museum who said, if you don't rescind the award, we are not going to cut you a check. Well, sometimes there are some folks who checks you don't need. And in the case here, you actually have done more harm to the legacy of the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute than you actually did any good, because not only did you cancel the award, you canceled the gala that went along with it. Maybe the lesson here is that for the folks sitting on the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute, that you might need to go back to your roots. You might need to go back as to the people who you were so-called honoring with this particular institute, the folks who were fighting for human rights, the people who were fighting for labor rights, people who were fighting for dignity. That's really what is missing here. But no, what you actually have is a bunch of corporate shills who are sitting on a board, who made it look real good on their resume, and they were supporting black people in civil rights. And now what you've decided to do is actually diss somebody who should have been honored years ago. But see, you didn't do this to Harry Belafonte. You didn't do it to Danny Glover. You didn't do it to the other folks who have been critical of Israel. And this notion that somehow Israel can't be critiqued is nonsense. Any nation can be critiqued. In fact, I recall that the fact that Israel was supplying weapons to South Africa regime during apartheid. What does that actually say about Israel when it comes to black people? Now, this is not a commentary about Israel, but what it is about is the integrity of honoring people, especially black folks, who've been putting it on the front lines for years. See, I can remember when Andrew Young was fired as UN ambassador because he had a secret meeting with the Palestinians. He was trying to broker peace in the Middle East, but there are those who said, no, we don't want that. And so President Jimmy Carter had to release him. I remember when Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr. was highly criticized because of his comments about Palestinians when he ran for president in 1984 and 1988. The reality is that this here, Palestinians and folks who are Jewish in Israel deserve respect, deserve a place to live in peace. But it is nonsense to somehow say that because you disagree with the policies of a country, that you can't even be honored in your hometown. I really hope on February 16th, they have a jam-packed event where they have 2 and 3 times the number of people who normally attend the Civil Rights Institute's gala. I really hope it's 2,000 and 3,000. I hope young people turn out for the conversation with Angela Davis. I hope older folks turn out. And I hope the people there also use that event to rekindle the spirit of Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth, a black man who did not bow down to any bigot there in Birmingham. What is the lesson here? I keep telling y'all. You got to fund your own freedom, because when somebody else is paying for your freedom, then they control what you do. They control what you say. They control who you honor. Now, whether they are Jewish, whether they are white, whether they are black, the bottom line is here. Sometimes you got to have the courage to tell people, hell no, we disagree respectfully. That's what the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute should have said, and they didn't. And now they've made their jobs a hell of a lot harder because they chose to be hard-headed. I say, lesson learned. Folks, be sure to support Roland Martin Unfiltered by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. We want you to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give supports this show and the work that we do. And so we thank all the folks who have given. Tomorrow we should be running, or is it today, guys? We'll be running the video with all of our donors, and we'll be, as folks give, we'll be adding those each week. Again, honoring you who have supported this show. Again, go to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. If you also missed our conversation last night with the cook, Michael Twitty, about the history of black folks in food, go to our YouTube channel. It's a great conversation. You don't want to miss that. That's at youtube.com/Roland S. Martin. I want to appreciate Bill Spriggs, who was here. Rena, thanks a bunch. Joe Madison, thanks a bunch. Monique, thanks a bunch. And go ahead. You wore your damn shirt, so I know you go ahead, show your shirt. Because, see, you said this on the show last time with Malik. Y'all go ahead and zoom in. And Monique is selling this shirt. And so she should be giving a cut to the show. But go ahead. Y'all go ahead. We got robotic camera. Zoom in. Zoom in. Go ahead.
Are You Finished was birthed on this show. Thanks, Ro.
Yeah, so
add it to my list.
Are you pausing or are you finished? Remember, that's what she jammed up Malik on the show. And so she said, where can I get the shirt? Come on, sell it.
You can go to Monique Presley on Shopify and get the shirt. Or just go to my Instagram page at Monique Presley, and it's in the link.
Okay, if you just put it on MoniquePresley.com and just say go there, that's the easiest thing in the world.
go to my Instagram, follow me, and then get a shirt.
Lord have mercy. I got to teach some people entrepreneurship. All right, y'all. We appreciate all of y'all watching. Be sure to, again, follow us on Facebook, Periscope, and YouTube. Click live notifications so when we go live, you will be notified by that as well. So thanks a bunch. Got to go. Holla! You want to check out Roland Martin Unfiltered? YouTube.com/Roland S. Martin. And subscribe to our YouTube channel. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. See that name right there? Roland Martin Unfiltered. Like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's YouTube.com/Roland S. Martin. And don't forget to turn on your notifications so when we go live, you'll know it. You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Our goal is to get 20,000 of our fans contributing $50 each for the whole year. You can make this possible. RolandMartinUnfiltered.com.